All right. And a transcript is available from this call. Openscapes is an open source approach and a movement that helps researchers and those supporting research find each other and feel empowered to do data-intensive science. We use a creative approach, drawing inspiration and skills from many different places. We provide structures for technical skill building, collaborative teamwork, and inclusive community development. All Openscapes activities are bound by our code of conduct, and some of the essence of this is to be respectful and value each other's ideas, styles, and viewpoints, and we can all lead by example and match our actions with our words. Kukstem for joining us here today. I live and work on the traditional lands and unceded territory of the Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc people. This is also known as Kamloops, British Columbia. In Canada, September 30th, that's Monday, is the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. For more than 150 years, Indigenous children were taken from their families and communities to attend Indian residential so-called schools, and more than 150,000 children attended these schools. Many never returned home. The day is meant to honor the healing journeys of residential school survivors and their families, and it's also time to engage in meaningful discussion about the history and legacy of the residential school system. I've put a link there to the report from several years ago on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada that has 94 calls to action, and we're barely scratching the surface of taking those steps. To learn more about whose lands you're on, I've put a link there in the doc, nativeland.ca. So our plan today is all about celebrating this White House visit and a Washington, D.C. visit that Ileana and Julie were on. So Openscapes was recognized at this celebration of the Office of Science and Technology Policy Year of Open Science Recognition Challenge winners. Julie and Ileana represented the Openscapes team in our community at that event, as well as a workshop called Open Science Dynamic Convergence, and Julie was a panelist on that. So Ileana and Julie are going to interview each other to share their reactions and thoughts about all their experiences. And toward the end, we'll have 15 to 20 minutes for your questions. So please type your questions at the bottom in this doc. It really is meant to be a collaborative notes doc. If you add your name during Q&A, we may invite you to ask your question, meaning unmute to ask your question instead of us saying your words. And I am going to briefly introduce Julie and Ileana. And I've put a link there to our team page in case you want to read more. So Ileana Fenwick is a core Openscapes team member. She leads the Pathways to Open Science program. She is currently a marine sciences PhD student at UNC Chapel Hill. And she, in addition to her research, is a fierce advocate for HBCU engagement and equity in open science. HBCU stands for Historically Black Colleges and Universities. And yeah, she's an advocate for building equity in open science and marine science through her consulting and volunteer work. Julie Lowndes is a core Openscapes team member, and she's our founding director. She's a marine ecologist. And again, we all know her as a huge advocate for open science and building this movement that we here and you all are part of. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ileana and Julie to take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Steph, and hi, everybody. So yeah, Ileana and I thought we'd start off by describing moments in action, which was a recommendation from Liz Neely. And then we can give more context from there. And so let's just go ahead and get started. Ileana, would you please share your in the action moment and tell us about your first impressions?
Yes, I would love to. And while we're kind of chatting, we're going to start sharing some of our photos from visiting the White House. But it was overall an incredible visit. We were able to visit on that Wednesday, go to the White House. For me, the moment that really felt transformative was sitting at the table. And so what we're seeing here, this is photos of us with the sign, with the other co-celebrants and honorees of the White House Challenge, some of which have joined us here today. So really excited to see you all again. We can go ahead to the next slide. So the moment for me that felt incredibly surreal was sitting at this table. It was, as you can see, a very ornate room. It was an incredible place, lots of people in this room. But for me, I remember walking in and not really knowing where to sit. I wasn't sure, at the main table, at the seats around the table. And it was this really surreal moment of asking our White House coordinator, Miriam, to where am I supposed to sit at this table? And she said, sit at the main table, sit at the big table. Like, that's where you're supposed to be. You're a winner, you're an honoree here. And that's where you're supposed to be sitting. And in that moment, it was just all kind of hitting me that, this is what we were working really hard for. We were here as experts. And years ago, when I first learned about open science as a participant in the Openscapes Champions program, that was 2021. And it feels like such a short amount of time has passed. And here I am now sitting at a table with White House officials, with policy officials, with organizations and individuals from different agencies in our federal government. And it was a really surreal and an incredible moment for me. We can go to the next slide. I'll just chat a little bit more about some of these moments to show some of our incredible other honorees that were here, and we have linked some of their projects as well. The way that we were able to share about our projects, we did a roundtable of speaking for about 7 minutes. And so Julie and I were able to talk about Openscapes, to talk about the different initiatives, the Pathways to Open Science program as well. And so here were some of the other honorees that we had the pleasure and privilege of being able to sit next to, some really incredible projects that were a part of this initiative. And we can go to the next slide. Here is a snapshot of our agenda for the day when we were at the White House. It was so cool seeing our name on the fancy thick paper and being able to have a few extra copies of that, like sitting here on the desk that maybe I'll frame or something from just excitement and how fun this was. But just a little bit of an overview of other folks who were in the room with us, some of their incredible initiatives. And you can see the categories or how it kind of connects to this open science movement building, connecting to community, to innovation, all types of projects and folks who were really representing all of these different avenues of open science and what's coming up. And we can go to the next slide. Yes, so this was a pretty cool moment, walking into the building and seeing this nice welcome rug. This is a great rug that they have here because it was such a nice photo op too. But one of the first things we saw when we walked into the building, really, reinforcing this moment of like, wow, we are in the White House. We're taking photos in the White House. There are some really incredible federal agencies that are represented in this room that care about open science and who care about what we have to say about open science. And so it really, really resonated with us to be able to take these photos. We took lots of photos and looking forward to sharing more of those with you all. And these are just some of the incredible folks who are also representing open science interests within their government agencies, some of which have also joined us today as well. And we can go to the next slide. So
the cupcakes.
They were also great. They had the presidential seal on them, which was really cool. You got to eat the little, top piece, and it was just really nice as a part of the celebration. The cupcakes, the napkins, everything with the presidential seal, our cool name tags, our badges. So it was an incredible opportunity. And this was part of our celebration that we got to have as well. And we can go to the next slide. And so here is Julie and I, and you'll see we have our glasses on. We had our aviators just in case we ran into Joe Biden and wanted to match. So you'll see that throughout. We made sure to take some photos with and without our aviators on, just to, have a good time and to really celebrate that we were here. And maybe if we got the chance to run into Joe Biden, we were prepared. But this was us with the kind of celebratory sign right outside of the room where we were able to have our incredible conversations. And now I want to hand it over to Julie and ask what your moment was like and how you were feeling.
Yeah, thanks. It's so cool to hear you describe all these moments and just like reflect on them. I think for me, the moment was first stepping into the building. We had gone through 3, I think, different pieces of security outside, in addition to have being pre-approved in advance. So there was a lot of steps involved. And then we were in the building and we were unchaperoned. We had an hour before our event in the room that you shared. And we were free to explore and encouraged to explore. So I don't know, I feel like there's an analogy there of like this, like there's history and structure, but also we can shape as we want to. That was really neat. So this is, a picture of you, Ileana, like right beyond that floor mat that was welcoming us to the building, and you're in front of President Biden and VP Harris, which is so awesome. And the room itself, had all these beautiful columns, and the floors had all this marble that I think Jamaica, you pointed out had fossils in them. So we were, we're like the nerdy marine ecologists looking at the particularly the mollusk fossils, which is very cool. There were staircases with like beautiful stained glass peeking out of the top that was so cool. And this is sort of one of these views of down the hallways, and they had flags, and just kind of the sort of importance of the space was really cool. And it was neat to see kind of the architecture reflecting that. We got to go into VP Harris's office, which is so awesome. We saw her nameplate and got all excited and peered in the sort of side staff room and just kind of peered in. And the woman welcomed us into not only her sort of antechamber room, but this actual whole room. So this is her ceremonial office that is very, gilded and historic and formal, and amazing to be there, like to share that space that she's been in. There's also we were able to go back with a few other awardees and take a selfie. And when we have that picture, we'll share that as well, because that was really neat to see so many of us in there. And then after the event, we all went outside onto what are called the Navy steps, which are kind of on the side of the Eisenhower building. And so on this picture on the left, the building is behind us, and on the picture on the right, this is the White House. So that's kind of the side view of the White House. So we're within, one set of gates with the White House, different clearance to go into the actual building, but we're right side by side, and it was just really awesome. And again, we were, anticipating like, will we see Biden? We've got our aviators ready. It was actually when my husband learned that we were going to the White House, that was the first, he was like, that's cool, I'm gonna buy you aviators. Like, it was like this like immediate reaction, which I thought was so cool. So yeah, these are photos of us at the White House. And this is a quote from the National Museum of African American History and Culture that was amazing to visit while we were in DC as well. And one other photo that I guess we can get into this a little bit more later, but just I can stop screen sharing in a moment. But well, actually, why don't I'll bring this one back up when we talk about this. How about that? I'll leave it. I'll leave it here.
Into our next question. But also just like, it was incredible sitting by Julie throughout the course of this day, and just like letting the gravity of the moment sink in, that we were in the nation's capital talking to these different federal agencies and groups about this work that we were doing. And I think it was also a really important lesson in accepting how cool and big and like awesome this moment and like celebration was. And I think, Julie and I did kept reminding each other, like, this is a big deal. We are so happy. Like, we deserve to be here. This is so cool. We need to celebrate this. And it was just a really nice moment to celebrate that in general. And so as a little bit of a segue there, I know folks have a general gist of why we were there, but Julie, why were we at the White House, and what was Openscapes recognized for?
Yes. So Openscapes was being recognized for our work helping teams shift to open science, both cross-government. You could see on that agenda that we were listed with NASA and NOAA and EPA, and also academic groups and the Pathways to Open Science group. So we were recognized for that work and the sort of visible impact and mechanism we have for growing that movement. And that feels really big to say that out loud. Like it's hard to sort of claim that impact, I guess, but that's why we were there, and it's really awesome. We had originally submitted for Openscapes as a submission to the 2023 Year of Open Science Open Science Recognition Challenge. And that submission was by myself and Ileana, but also Aaron Robinson, Luis Lopez, and Eli Holmes. So we were sort of representing Openscapes as a team of 5, which was the max that could submit it. So it was really neat that this work was recognized like that. Let's see, do we should I talk a little bit more about what we said, or do you want to start off with what we said? What do you think, Ileana?
Sure, I can chat a little bit about that. So we showed you all the agenda in our photo, and we'll share that again as well. But as I mentioned, we had 7 minutes to talk about our project, our team, and how our work, fell under this open science umbrella. And so I really loved the quote that Julie shared. And so I'll just read it because I think it was a wonderful start. It was from Dr. Justin Rice, working with NASA Earth Science, and he said that the impact that Openscapes has had in the last 2 years is unprecedented at NASA. And starting with a quote like that, it was clear that folks in the room were able to see the gravity of, the impact that this movement building has taken in an agency like NASA. So I thought that was an incredible way to start. And we delved into more about the Openscapes movement building and what that means and how it's touched different government agencies, academic groups. And then we also talked about the flywheel. So we got to talk about the flywheel a lot. It's something that most folks here may have heard about already, but really thinking about how Openscapes describes this movement building and how there are really intentional steps and priorities that we take along that road to build momentum and keep this open science movement growing. And I had the incredible opportunity to also talk about the Pathways to Open Science program. So that's our 6-week annual program for Black researchers and historically Black college and university students, HBCU researchers and students, to engage and have a first touch with open science. And we talked a lot about, while at this meeting and while talking with government agencies, about forking and this concept that we're able to reuse and modify for our own use the different resources and programming and ideas that exist within this open science movement. And the Pathways program is an example of that fork. We took what worked really well in the Champions program and started to think about how it could cater to an audience that was historically excluded from a lot of conversations in science and in data science education. And so maybe I'll pass it back, Julie, if you have more to add. We were able to chat for our 7 minutes and then also answer a few questions as well. So I'll hand it back.
Yeah, no, that was great. It was hard to say all of the things in those 7 minutes, and so that arc that you described was a good place we landed on in advance. And yeah, I think we also had the chance within those 7 minutes to also have like a big ask or describe a need, and so we focused on how there really aren't enough examples of what a sustainable job in open science looks like. We need more paid time to do open science, both to learn within our daily jobs and to teach others, to contribute to open source, to connect with people within our organizations and outside of our organizations in open science. So it was really, the sort of paid time to learn was something that has resonated the more we say that out loud. We were recently I think I said this, I think at the White House, that I had recently been at the ESIP meeting in the summer and spoken to a NOAA data official and said that paid time to learn was the most important need I saw. And she grabbed me by the arm and sat me down and said, like, let me write this down. This is something I've never heard before. It's not like it's not a tool. It's not a it's still a big lever, but it's one that maybe people have. So that I think that sort of emboldened me to say that a bit more here. And also the idea that, if we're asked, what can we do? People in the room, who have authority and levers to pull around time to learn, but also like contracts and procurement and reporting. I said, like, if we're asked, through open science, if we're asking people to change the way they work, like, we need to be willing to change the way we work as well. So what can we do around contracts, procurement, reporting? And it wasn't at the White House, but it was at this other event that we'll mention in a moment, that I did bring up the California Water Board's example of having contracts folks participate in opens events and learn how to be more open and streamlined and transparent within contracts teams, even though, open doesn't mean public, but it can be more open within contracts teams. So I think that example was another sort of seed that, Ileana mentioned, how we focused on forking and the idea that, like, you can see what's possible and fork that to your place, like take what works and adapt it to your place, but keep pointing back to where you got this idea and forward that this is something people can repeat. So I think that was really, it was neat to try to, say that in the like 20 seconds that we were able to give that airtime in the White House. Yeah, so it felt good. When finding a whirlwind, I just said to I think to some of the NASA mentors earlier this morning that it kind of felt like a wedding. Like, there was like so much like time preparing and anticipating, and then it like happened and was over in a flash, and it was like, I hope I said the right thing. But it felt really, really good to be, there at that table sitting with Ileana, and us being able to reinforce each other, and just, we give each other, we're just braver in pairs or together, right? And knowing that we were representing everyone was special.
I love that, braver in pairs. I am absolutely so brave when I'm sitting next to you, Julie, and sitting next to all of us here in Openscapes, and really thinking about how this movement has contributed to who I am and the support I've seen within the Openscapes community for the Pathways program and for just this broader community building within open science. And before we pivot to talking a little bit more about the other reason that we were in DC, I just thought I would bring up some of the questions that we had gotten from federal agencies while we were there that I thought were really great. One being, they were wondering, how do we continue to support work for groups that are underrepresented? And, that was an opportunity for myself to talk about allocating funding at a federal level to programs like the Pathways to Open Science program, and how historically Black colleges and universities are producing a huge part of our diverse workforce in the United States, and how that's a group of institutions that have been historically underfunded and systemically underfunded, and how these people in the room who have access to money and grants and things like that, being able to bring that up in that space and talk about something that's so near and dear to my heart, really, really meant a lot to me. It was so cool to bring that up and talk about HBCUs there, and to have, that resonate with other folks in the room who have allocated time, effort, and energy to also building connections like that within their own projects. So that was just a very like impactful moment for me. It touches my heart so much to have been able to bring that up in that conversation. And then the other question that I think was really great, and even folks in this room could think about or would love to hear your thoughts and ideas as well, is that we were asked by some of the federal agencies, what would be an ideal funding breakdown for organizations and projects and movements like what we're doing? Is it fully federal and they're investing in these projects? Is it private? Is it philanthropic? What is a reasonable and sustainable combination of funding that would support projects like ours? Sustainability and funding was a topic that came up a lot for different open science movement builders and organizations and projects. And so it was really impactful to hear that there are agencies within the government who are trying to figure out or are curious about how they can invest in projects like this one. And one of the pieces that came out of that, and something that I know a lot of folks who have been in this space even for a little bit longer can likely relate to as well, is that, you know, investing in projects and infrastructure that already exists and supporting projects that have, you know, some time on the ground already is something that's largely lacking and would be, you know, enormously supportive for projects that have been around for a while. A lot of money goes to things that are new and shiny and cool and really cool projects, but there are also really interesting and engaging acts of community building and work that are occurring every day, and that have been around for a while and still need funding to build that movement and keep their work going sustainably. So that was another kind of topic and question. And if other folks have ideas or answers to that, or what you'd like to see, that would be really cool to hear. I know we've got a lot of different folks in the room here today. And maybe now oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, maybe that would be a good point too. If folks who are at the White House, I know Laura and Jamaica, not to put you on the spot, but if anybody wants to share their experiences or responses to those questions, you're welcome to. I think Laura may have had to leave.
Hi all. I have a meeting right in a minute, but it was so much of what you're saying is resonating, and in terms of our experience, and just, I mean, really enjoying the chat and how different people are responding and enjoying and contributing. So yeah, I'm Laura Truey, Zooniverse, online citizen science with almost 3 million people around the world who come and participate. And so we were a version of, in open science, also open source, and then how you feed back your data and discoveries with the volunteers who are participating. So many of the open science principles overlap with this community science, participatory science, citizen science type of space.
Thanks so much, Laura.
I can also add a perspective. So I work with the NASA TOPS program, and I'm part of the subcommittee, the OSTP subcommittee that helped to draft and launch this award series. So I can't speak from the perspective of somebody who was recognized, but I can speak to how lovely it was to have been involved in the Recognition Challenge series from the beginning, and to have been on you know, I was also a judge, so I was sort of on all sides of the effort from the birth of it to being in that room and being able to celebrate with the amazing projects who had been selected as winners. It was, I remember my first time going to the White House, also as somebody who never ever thought that I would be there, and is to be able to welcome other people and to recognize their hard work, recognize their incredible contributions to this work that we're trying to move forward, was really moving, and really it was just really enriching for me as well. I'm so glad I got to be there, and congratulations.
Thank you so much, and thank you for everything you do. Really special.
So we talked about the White House, but also wondering, we were in DC for an extra day and a half. And I'll ask Julie, why were we still in DC for a day and a half?
Yes, so we also participated in the Open Science Dynamic Convergence workshop. This was a 2-day workshop organized by a group called ORCA, the Open Research Community Accelerator, in collaboration with CERN, which is based in Switzerland, and UNESCO, which is they're both big leaders in open science in Europe and globally, as well as the participation of NASA and the US National Science Foundation. So this was a workshop that convened a lot of different people. There were sort of policy leaders internationally. There was, it comes to mind, like the head of open science for China and the African continent, as well as the groups I've mentioned already. There were community leaders and sort of researchers like us in a way. There were also funders. Some of the big US funders in open science were there, like the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and the Moore Foundation. There were also some European funders like the Wellcome Trust. And there were project leaders and and thinkers in open science. So it was amazing to be invited to this place. There was also open registration, and I know they had many more select people that signed up than were able to be selected. And yeah, so I was on a panel on, so the first day we focused on sort of a policy panel of people talking from, so Shelley Gentleman from NASA was there alongside folks from CERN on a panel sharing their sort of policy perspectives on how they were able to support open science from their positions. And then we had breakout rooms around engagement, coordination, and evaluation were the three main themes around how we can support open science. And on day 2, the panel that I was a part of was like, what does this look like on the ground to build communities and support communities? And so that's where I was able to share a little, same themes that we just shared about, that we talked about in the White House, but I had a little bit more time on the panel to give more examples and details. But it was really neat to, I think when people say that like the hallway conversations are really interesting, or like the line in line for food, I think that this conference really like resonated like that for me. Like it was small enough that you could see the same person you could see the same person more than once. So if you wanted to follow up with them or ask a question, you could. But it was neat to, I think like one of the times that comes to mind for me was it was raining lightly, but a few of us took our plates outside to eat lunch and we're sort of huddled under this umbrella, and we're able to talk about like time to learn and as being a big ask. And it was neat to be able to kind of practice that in a way in the rain over lunch. And then that helped me kind of feel stronger, braver about it on stage and then at the White House. So that was, yeah. What sticks out to you, Ileana, from the 2-day workshop?
Yeah, I think what sticks out to me the most was how international the group was that we were a part of. I think up until now, a lot of my open science conversations and a lot of my thought about open science was very much insulated to like this community thinking about open science, even just starting to approach it from the federal level, like that, going to the White House kind of introduced that, but also being in this room where there were folks from all over the world, people who had traveled over a day even to like get to this meeting, even though it was only 2 days, like probably spent more time in transit than they did in DC. It was really incredible to see the type of work that was happening all over the world, all different continents even. So that really resonated with me. I thought it was so cool. And it was my first opportunity to really think about and engage with open science on a global scale. Something that I hadn't had the opportunity to spend too much time thinking about, but it was also really fun to see and think about like the challenges that are spanning across our oceans, across our continental divides. A lot of it, we found a lot of common ground with the challenges and the goals and the hopes that we had for open science. And I think that was probably one of the coolest pieces for me. And hearing folks being able to talk about that. I loved the panels, incredible panelists that were able to speak to our group, being able to pick up some of the nuggets of wisdom that people were sharing consistently. And also to meet like so many cool open science, like I call them my superheroes sometimes, like my science superheroes, my open science superheroes, like being able to meet them in person. And also appreciating like Julie facilitating, introducing me to different people, connecting with different people, being really excited to keep that momentum going and how we can connect the work that we're currently doing within Openscapes to other movement building groups and organizations. So I loved all of that. I thought it was incredible. And maybe when we have some questions at the end, we can talk a little bit more. Because yeah, I know we're gonna skip into the Q&A. Some really cool like quotes, moments, things like that. If folks have questions, I'd love to share a little bit more about that. But yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, if you have a quote or a moment that comes to mind immediately, you're welcome to share it, and then we can shift into the discussion that Steph will lead.
Sure. Yeah, I have two quotes that I really liked, and they're on the first page of my notebook. My new notebook. Julie got me this notebook right before we started, and I was really excited to use it. It's gotten good use now since then. But one of the quotes that really resonated with me, and I'll go ahead and find her full name and affiliation, and put it in our notes document. But hearing from one of the panelists on the first day, talking about how language and the accessibility of open science are really playing into one another. One example being that the language that this speaker spoke was not available on the conference translation app that we were using, and how accessibility needs to extend beyond just our usual expectations in these spaces to make sure open science is really accessible for everybody. And so one of the quotes that stuck with me is that, open science has the possibility of conforming to the history of colonization. And it's our job to make sure that open science and its advancement does not follow that exact same path. And so I loved that quote. I'm going to find her exact name. We were calling her Knox at the meeting. She was from the National Research Foundation of South Africa. But, thinking about and, really grappling with the importance of the work that we're doing and why we're doing it, and why open science is a movement that continues to center accessibility and equity. That really resonated with me. Then the other quote that got a lot of laughs from the audience and a lot of people resonating with it was that we publish too much. And I think a lot of people really agreed with that, within the traditional confines of like science and academia and those types of things. And it's really a challenge to keep progress moving forward if we're having to peer review and publish every little thing that we're doing. Or, I think back to Julie's point of reporting and documentation and how we can lower that expectation so that the work can continue to be done. So those are just two of the quotes I really enjoyed. And I'll hand it over to Steph for our Q&A.
Thank you, you two. That's so delightful. We don't have any questions typed in the doc, and I think that's partly the nature of this kind of conversation. Oh, I also want to give a shout out to the kind, fast typing person who has been adding these notes to the doc. Did you want to out yourself, Matt Fisher? There you go. I had a feeling it was you. Thank you. Anyway, this is like
happy to help.
Go community. I think it's reasonable if people wanted to, instead of, you could type in the doc, but you could also raise a hand, or if there's not too many people, it's okay to unmute and ask one question at a time to give others a chance.
So I'm Gwen. I'll just start asking a question. I was actually having a meeting. It was so interesting that you're talking about procurement. Because someone gave me a document yesterday and they wanted feedback on like acquisition and procurement and all this kind of stuff, and there isn't a lot of guidelines. And it's all about technical, like defining technical data priority focus area deliverable, and not avoiding vendor lock and all this other kind of stuff. And I don't know if you have written anything about how you like to see procurement done in the government, or if you've read anything about that you might want to send our way, so that those of us who are, because I think the Office of Management and Budget just submitted some, like, I don't remember what it is. I think it's 1040. I can see if I can find it. It's memorandum. Maybe it's not this one. It's 2410. 2410. And it's all about, and they've kind of asked for how to implement it. And it's from March 28 of this year. And it's this advancing governance, innovation, and risk management for, anyway, I feel like I'm talking too much. But
So
if you have anything that you can send our way, I would be so happy, because there's very little written about it anywhere. And
yes. Yes, I would, and other folks from the government might have even more details, but I would recommend Recoding America as a book, as a way to point people to and frame things. There's also a 1-hour podcast interview with the author. But
it's Jennifer
all
Polk.
about,
I've read it.
oh, you've read it. Great.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm completely familiar with it, but at the same time, I've asked people from the digital service, the U.S. digital service, to look at it with me tomorrow. But at the same time, like, I'm just wondering if there's anything else, like, anyway,
Was
I
there-
think
yeah.
I'm
go
going to
ahead.
interrupt. I'm going to interrupt and say, Gwen, I wonder if, because you put the call out, if anyone here on the call knows of an example of something that they could paste it in the doc, because yeah, on page 8, we've now got the Q&A. Your question is there. The link to the Recoding America slide is there. And perhaps we could move on to another question, and people, unless Ileana or Julie has something to say, people can add their own notes there.
That's great. Thanks, Gwen. Yeah, Sam. Good to
Hi,
see you.
thanks. Yeah, good to see you all too. I'm just totally wowed. This was so cool to hear about. Like, I love your description and your energy about it. And it's just like so cool to feel secondhand. My question is, like, being in California, I often appreciate sort of the real and the kind of metaphorical distance from the center. So having had this experience, like being in the center, being near power, like, what's your feeling about approaches to open science that are the top-down kind of like almost government stamped sort of thing versus more grassroots bottom up? Like, what was the feeling like being in that kind of like powerful, like gilded space versus kind of the more scrappier approaches to open science that are out there?
That's a really good question. Ileana, do you have a first thought?
I love that question. And I'm also like taking a beat to think about it. Sitting in that room was really cool. It felt optimistic. It felt exciting. I agree that it was a room where it felt like we saw and imagined like the power that was there. I think part of what felt powerful as well is like the government's capacity to funnel money into projects like this and to be so transformative in allocating time and allocating money towards these projects. Like that to me is probably, I would say that might be the difference. Like it felt like in that room, there is somebody who could probably convince someone, or like within their agency, like they have that power, at least a bit of influence to start to change maybe what the call for funding looks like, or the expectation of those, funds that come from our federal government, versus like when I think about the community building that I do and, talking to people who are just excited about open science and we're keeping this movement building going. It does feel very bottom up, and thinking about like, how are we engaging with people? How do we get them to care about it? And from the government perspective, it was like, okay, they have like, these expectations and they know what open science is. And now it's like, hopefully they use that power and push the change in the direction that they can. But I enjoy also the grassroots piece of it. Like, I think a lot about how community building is a big part of this. And I think every single group that was in that room has spent just an incredible amount of energy and effort in building the communities that they're serving, and also in building trust and having groups of people who are working on these projects, but also the people that they're serving, and like knowing that it's very impactful to them. And so to me, like, the Pathways program, whether the money was there or not, would happen, and like people care and our community is there. And that's still so important, and hopefully bridging the gap between the two, like government agencies are able to, put that funding where it needs to go, and it can support projects like that. It can support more projects like what we do, spending so much time building community and building trust. And I can imagine that's something that's a lot harder to do sitting in that room. There's a lot more, I think, skepticism and difficulty trusting like government agencies and, with community and with, wanting them to serve you fairly and equitably. So yeah, that's where I land with that question. I really like that one.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question and thoughts, Ileana. I think I'd add, there is like this need for both these like grassroots sort of scrappy efforts and the policy, and I think something, where you fit relative, like where you feel relative to that. Like I think I still feel like Openscapes is in the scrappy grassroots effort, but then sort of being in that room, it was like, oh, we're like, that's not how everyone sees Openscapes, and partly we're in, how can we level up in one way? I don't know if I'm not really articulating that well, but that's kind of one feeling. But one of the things I did to prepare to go to the White House was I reviewed 2 of our past sessions that we held at ESIP that were, which is the Earth Science Information Partners meeting. One was from January 2022, so very early days, and it was the first time we had the Pathways program with Ileana and NOAA Fisheries with Eli Holmes and Anna Holder from the California EPA, and Amy Steicher and Aaron Freeze from NASA. So we had this cross-governmental group, and the conversation was around grassroots and leadership, and how you need like NOAA was feeling kind of scrappy and looking at NASA saying, oh, look at your leadership approves this. That's so cool. And then I remember Amy Steicher saying, yeah, but people still look to us for what it looks like on the ground. So there is this grassroots and leadership level. And I thought that was so cool to hear that. And I think where my mind is going more and more these days is how not only how important it is to have both grassroots and leadership together, but also like the supervisors and folks like between are so important to this effort too. And that goes back to previous notes that we were talking about. I'll stop there. And Steph, I'm sorry, I missed your hand as I was talking.
That's okay. I was going to ask a question that Angie Reed put in the chat because she's on from her phone, so it's hard for her to communicate.
Great.
Her question is, do you have any ideas on how to help agencies like the EPA to embrace open science? It would really help tribes better explain how they do things.
Yes. Great question, Angie. The EPA is one of the reasons we were recognized here. So there is an effort within the EPA, and hopefully this sort of recognition challenge and this kind of effort can help them build their movements around open science as well. And we're hopefully going to continue to be a small part of that. But yeah, I don't know if others from the EPA are here or want to talk about it more. Maybe you can put that in the doc or in the chat too, if you don't speak up right now.
I was going to add that we talked a lot about incentives and metrics and how do you get people to want to do open science or have the time or, to convince people that open science is worth it. And thinking a lot about the balance between like Openscapes and loving storytelling and how powerful that medium is for getting people to come to the open science side, but also balancing with the reality of a metric-based world and how numbers and, how much time is saved and, things like that, how those things are still important to higher level leadership. And maybe Eli, I know your hand is raised already, but that's something we've talked about plenty before and you've experienced a lot. I saw, Julie, you add art as well to the chat, but just a lot of the different ways that you're able to resonate with people. I know in community building, I think it's been storytelling, but I know as it goes up the chain and higher level leadership requires different expectations and, to be able to give that support, whether it's monetarily or with allocating time. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Eli.
Yeah.
My question is kind of following up on kind of you alluded to at the end of your comment, Julie. So having gone through this experience and, you know, been there at the table with these other groups that have similar objectives, goals, and who are also, I think, I'm just guessing, are kind of in that scrappy category. You're not traditionally, the people who are at that table are not traditionally at that table. So the question is, yeah, what do you think? Has it changed your views about kind of where you're going next? Or is it just was kind of like made you feel better about where you're going next? Yeah, or reflections on that.
I think for myself, and Tara Robertson, I think put it really well, like she shares a newsletter and also amplified that we had gone to the White House on Facebook. But talking about dreaming and like dreaming even bigger. And I think going to the White House was like this moment where it was like, I mean, who would have believed? I mean, especially for me, like having learned about open science, like in the Champions program just in 2021, like who would have believed that this moment would have occurred? And like, let this be like the least of my dreams. Like I saw a video recently that was like, you know, dream like your biggest dream and let that be like the lowest thing that you want to achieve. And like going to the White House was like, well, this was crazy. This is a dream I didn't even dream. Like let this be like the new starting point. And so going into this, you know, we were talking about like, what if somebody has $10,000 to give, $50,000 to give, $1 million, $10 million? What are we asking them for? What are we saying we want that money to go towards? What is the next big idea or like huge pitch that we can give? And I don't think that I was thinking that way until this opportunity came about. And I'm really excited that now I have ideas and answers to some of those questions and am able to dream and think like very big. Even like I said, like this is my first time thinking about open science on a global scale. Like what does it now mean to think beyond this community that we've built here and like go even bigger? Like I never thought global before, but why not? Like why are we not at the why are we not at the UN? Like, you know, we met people from these organizations and like who were representing these efforts. And I don't see why like we shouldn't be able to do anything that we're setting our mind to. So that was a pretty cool moment. And I think, you know, in this space, we do a lot of dreaming and I always appreciate that. And I think everyone's really supportive of it. But now like dream even bigger and let the White House be like the fifth thing on the list of the many things we accomplish like in the next few years. So that was pretty cool. I think that was really perspective shifting for me, especially.
I love that the White House is like, yeah, it's a stepping stone.
It's a stepping stone. And it's a stepping stone. Like
That's amazing.
This is our community. Like, who are we to say that the White House is not the start? And what is 5 steps up from this? Like, I don't think Julie and I have figured it out yet, but let's think about it. Like, let's dream even bigger. And this made that very possible and very real for me.
I hate that like the energy is really building right now, but it's now 3 minutes to the top of the hour and we want to close with an efficiency tip of the day, an inclusion tip of the day. Before I do that, Julie or Ileana, did you have a last word to share?
Yeah, I would just say from Eli, just a quick response to Eli's question, and I'll think about it more. That idea of forking, connecting time to learn is something like we need as well. Like just being around the table with those other amazing groups that I had never heard of that are doing cool things that I would, you know, Openscapes could amplify or connect with or not be redundant with. So just how can we, yeah, it was nice to connect and be reinvigorated with the bigger picture, and we'll keep thinking about that.
Anything from you,
Thanks,
Ileana?
I will let that be it for today.
All right. All right. Well, that feels really great. We like to end with an efficiency and inclusion tip of the day. Today's efficiency tip I just learned yesterday from one of the NOAA Fisheries Openscapes mentors, and that is that you can, inside a Google Doc, you open a new Google Doc, and you can choose the option to start it as an email, and it will like recognize the emails in your contacts. You click those, type a subject line, draft the email, and there's a button that you can click that turns it into a Gmail email. There's a screenshot of that on page 10. I just tried it yesterday, and it's that easy. Inclusion tip of the day I thought was relevant to this kind of thing, and that is when you are introducing a colleague to someone you know, let's say, and it's a professional setting, the first thing you want to do is find out, like, you know, do they like to be called Adian Rios, or do they go by their nickname Adi? And then when you're introducing to someone, share something specific and unique about them. So we know Adian Rios as a person who is this like master of Adi's analogies, where she has this talent for turning like these complex or esoteric topics into this really relatable plain language that suddenly like large groups of people understand. And so keep that in mind when you're introducing a colleague to someone, sometimes in the sense of sponsorship, like you're welcoming someone to an environment they're not usually at this table. Introduce them in that respectful way. So with that, thank you all so much. This has just felt fantastic. It's like Julie and Ileana have shared the joy, but you have all shared it back, and that's just awesome. We will be posting the recording of this session on the event page and in this doc, and we'll follow up with a blog post with some of those more details from Julie and Ileana. Thank you all so much, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. This is the best. Thanks so much.